Hi, everybody. Welcome to Marc Summers Unwraps. We've been having some great guests, as you know. A couple of weeks ago, Phil Rosenthal was here, and Eric Bauza just did his voiceover repertoire, and the ratings exploded. You think they exploded before, you just wait. A gentleman who I've been a huge fan of for years was a neighbor of mine for a short time, and has hosted a boatload of shows, is our guest. Welcome, Tom Bergeron. How are you, sir?
You know, I thought the intro went better than I thought. Here's what you started by saying, you know, we've had some wonderful guests, and that stops now.
That's right. That's over as we speak.
We've taken a sharp left turn. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing darn good. The first time I met you, you're not going to remember, I was doing a talk show for Lifetime in New York City, and you were doing the show on FX.
Oh, Breakfast Time.
And I loved that show.
Me too.
You didn't know me. I called you up, and you were nice enough to invite me on the show, and I went to do it. And I'm going to say something that you may or may not agree with, but maybe your best work even back in the day, but I'm going to bet that's your favorite show you've ever done.
You would win that bet.
What, really?
And hands down.
Because
it was number one, the environment was unique. A 6,500 square foot apartment made for television.
Yep, perfect.
In the Flatiron District of New York. There was the magic, as I've said we lost one of the key members, the Al Rosenberg, who did Bob the Puppet.
Oh, no.
Passed away. And I said in part of my eulogy that it was like a Camelot of chemistry, the unique grouping of all of these people. Laurie Hibbard, now Laurie Gelman, my co-host. Jim Kokott, the announcer who always hid behind a copy of USA Today. Al Rosenberg, who had written and performed for Stern and Imus. You know, this guy probably pushing 300 pounds with a puppet, diving behind furniture with a lightning-fast wit. 2 to 2.5 hours of live television, all of which I would have on one index card. No IFB, nothing. The producers, the cameramen were all part of the on-camera family.
Then you had a group out on the road as well.
Yeah, the Road Warriors. Phil Kogan was one of those, who does Amazing Race now and a couple other shows for CBS. And he was just, he's always wonderful, but he was great. And we had 2 or 3 others who would go all around the country and do these wackadoodle stories, and all live. I remember there was one time, what the hell happened with Phil's remote? It was on a ski slope, and I think I'm remembering this right. The lift broke down or something like that. So we had these minutes to fill, and so no pun intended, to fill, and and he got trays from the
restaurant,
the restaurant, and slid down the mountain on trays with his microphone, giving it was just ludicrous. Ludicrous. About the only moment of the Fox version of that I enjoyed was there was one remote that nothing was happening, right? It was, I forget who was the road warrior. It wasn't Phil. And it was on the main street of this town. And I'm sitting there knowing this is dying. So I said, could I ask a favor? Could everybody on this side of the street cross to that side of the street, and you guys cross over to that side? And that's all he did. The whole town moved across just to get some motion going.
Oh, my God.
But it was that kind of, the Fox show, not so much, but Breakfast Time, start to finish was, and still is, my favorite experience.
How long was that show on?
Just about 2 years.
And the controversy of Bob the Puppet was one of the most absurd things I had ever seen in the history of TV.
That happened on the network show, the Fox show.
Fox. What was it? Why didn't they like that?
Well, there's that age-old saying, be careful what you wish for, right? So on FX, those of us who were doing the show, loving it, but always thought, FX is the farm team for the network,
right?
And there was an executive at Fox who loved Breakfast Time, Greg Meidel, and Greg wanted to take a 1-hour version to the network. And of course, for those of us who thought, okay, we're being called up to the big time,
like 9 o'clock against Regis, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing, right? But then, and I have to say I'm as guilty as anybody in sort of undermining what we did in the transition. It seemed like right from the start, everything that made Breakfast Time unique and wonderful
was taken away.
We started taking it away.
Yeah.
First I hear, well, we're going to go with a different announcer. And then they wanted to audition co-hosts and
get rid of Laurie?
Yeah. And they just wanted to have their options. So I'm starting to realize, oh, you didn't want breakfast time. You just wanted me to come do. And I think I auditioned with a couple of people. I said, no, Laurie and I have a great chemistry and everything. And so Al came over as Bob the Puppet. But it just, one decision after another. They got rid of the funky graphics and music and put this sort of Hallmark Channel-y theme song on. And it just, and then they repainted the apartment in these, primary colors. And it just
looked like Match Game or something.
It kind of like that. And there was a moment, Mark, I remember standing, I think, they replaced. They didn't really replace Laurie. It turned into like the Mike Douglas show. I had a different co-host every week.
Oh,
so that was sometimes it was okay, but mostly it was a nightmare. Then they want to get rid of the puppet. And
I remember that.
Oh my God! So I had it at that point. So I went very public with. I had an SOB campaign, Save Our Bob, but it really was sons of a bitch. I was really. A tendency that would also come back later. And it just was a nightmare. It really was. I don't think I'd ever drank as much as I drank.
No kidding.
Yeah.
You were that upset, huh?
Yeah. There was a bar right next door, Dewey's Flatiron. And that show was on from 9 to 10. And I swear to God, by 11 o'clock after the post-show meeting, I had my face up against the let me in! Because I had a driver taking me back to Connecticut.
Oh, man.
Oh, it was horrible.
Yeah, every now and then we walk into those shows and you go, why? I knew that I shouldn't have done this.
Yeah, but I didn't at the time.
Really?
It was only, it was sort of that, it's sort of like when you're in quicksand, you think, oh, this will be nothing. And then realize, oh, now I'm down to my knees.
Yeah, now what do I do?
And I'm in my, and it was too late. So
we're like two old broadcasters. It's a term that isn't
we're very
used.
much like that.
Yes, because you bring up the Mike Douglas reference, which I used to come home and watch, and I have a
Remember
story.
when John and Yoko did it for a week?
Yeah,
that was crazy.
That was think about that.
Yeah,
it's insane what happened on that show. So I came out of the womb knowing what I wanted to do, and I used to listen to WWL and WLW. On my radio under the bed with earphones.
Sounds so similar.
And I knew that this is something that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then I got WBZ, which I thought I had died and gone to heaven, and listened to Larry Glick.
Oh, God, who became a dear friend of
Oh,
mine.
my God, I'll tell you some Larry Glick stories. And so I got to live the dream.
Yeah.
I started off at a radio station, WBMP in Elwood, Indiana, when I was 15 years old, doing weekends from 6 to 11, playing Mantovani and Frank Sinatra.
Oh,
records.
yeah. 101 strings.
Oh, yeah, 101 strings, absolutely. 101 strings. Yeah. And then ripping and reading copy.
Oh, sure.
And I was getting paid, I think, $1.90 an hour in 1966, 67.
We've lived each other's resume.
I think so.
Yeah.
So you started, what, in New Hampshire?
My hometown in Massachusetts, Haverhill. I was 17, and I had a public speaking teacher at the high school who worked part-time as a newsman at the local radio station. So I made it my mission to brown-nose the hell out of him. And was in his class and did well. And radio was where I wanted to go, too. And BZ was a big part of that, growing up in northern Massachusetts. And
50,000 watts, Clear Channel.
Dave Maynard and Larry Glick and Jerry Williams, who was the controversial guy. And Glick was just unique among all the talk show hosts. And then also Gene Shepard on WOR.
I could
hear Gene Shepard.
I don't remember him on BZ.
No,
OR.
Gene Shepard, for anybody who doesn't know the name, he was the writer-narrator of A Christmas Story, and he plays Santa Claus in A Christmas Story, and he narrates it. And Gene Shepard had the kind of voice that even if nothing interesting was going to follow, he made you lean in because you thought, there's got to be something interesting. It was that kind of voice. It was hypnotic. And I loved the intimacy of radio. I loved the connection with...
creativity.
Yeah, creativity.
Did you ever listen to Monitor on NBC?
Oh, remind me. That sounds
Monitor
familiar.
was weekends.
Yeah.
And they had Durward Kirby, Ed McMahon,
oh my God,
Hugh Downs,
yeah.
all these people.
All the sidekicks.
And so on the weekends, when my mother would want to go to the grocery store or whatever, I couldn't wait to get in the car and turn on Monitor.
No kidding.
Because I got to listen to celebrities on NBC radio.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that inspired me as well. And so the first show you did was?
Well, I was filling. It's funny, you talked about doing a 6 to midnight.
Yeah.
That's what it was, Saturday nights, a rock show. And I have a sense memory of turning that microphone on, because I had the little, you probably had the same kind of board, little switch in the pot. You turn the pot up. And I remember my late grandfather recorded my first show. He was a wonderful supporter. And my heart was beating like a jackhammer. Of
course.
And I forget what joke I tried, but I could tell. I was the only one in the room, and I knew it died. And as a matter of fact, the Monday morning after my radio show, because I was a senior in high school, I'm walking down the hall, and this group of jocks are kind of hanging out there. Hey, Bergeron, we heard you on the radio Saturday. Oh, yeah, you did? You sucked. And they weren't wrong.
Oh,
they weren't wrong.
Did you use your real name?
Oh, yeah.
You did.
Oh,
See,
yeah.
The guy in Elwood didn't like Jews. And so I couldn't be Marc Berkowitz, which was my name at the time. So I became Mark Vaughn. To this day, I don't know where I got that name.
No kidding.
Yeah. So
did you know Roger Berkowitz?
No. Oh, wait a minute.
Legal Seafood.
Legal.
Yeah.
Of course.
Good
I
buddy
met
of
him
mine.
once.
Yeah.
And
Great guy.
they sold the place.
Yeah.
And I just went to Legal just to make sure it was still as
Is
good.
it good?
And it is.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
He kept the mail order business. So I'm sure he's still, kind of involved, but the actual day-to-day of the restaurants he sold.
I was concerned when they sold it.
Yeah.
That it was going to go
I kind
downhill.
of got it. I mean, it's a lot.
Yes.
It's a lot.
And he had gotten a little older, and you got to hope that either sons or brothers want to get involved, and at some point nobody does, and
right, exactly.
you do the smart thing. But WBZ must have been like it died and gone to heaven simply because that was in New England, and because of the range.
Yep.
So you started off doing a TV show, didn't you?
Well, that's the interesting thing. The radio show I did in New Hampshire in the early '80s was very improvisational. I'd call all over the world for crazy news stories and have musicians come in and perform live and live guests and spin records too. But that radio show came to the attention of people who worked in Boston television, because the signal for WHEB FM covered the North Shore of Massachusetts, where a lot of these people lived. So I got a call to come to audition for an overnight show on WCVB, Channel 5.
Oh, yeah.
And the audition went well, but they thought I was too young. I remember those days. And
we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah, I know, it's true. And the producer of that show called a friend of hers who was producing a kids magazine show, sort of like PM or Evening Magazine, but aimed at kids, called Super Kids. And she said, look, this guy it didn't work for our show, but he's good, so you should have him come over. And so I get this other call from WBZ in Boston.
Barry Shulman?
Yeah, he was, and Rich Kurlander and Francine Akbar.
Oh, my God.
Great, still great friends.
Oh, yeah.
Barry and Francine are. And so I went down to audition for this kid show, and apparently, I had an instinct that, according to the producer, I was the only one who did it. They had a stool in a sort of a just empty studio, stool, a bag with props in it, and kids, about 8 or 9 kids sitting on the stage right in front of you. And the audition was reach into the bag and whatever you pull out, improvise with it, which I was fine with. But I was sitting on a stool up away. I thought, this is ridiculous. So I took the stool and I moved it out of the way and I sat on the floor with the kids. And apparently I was the only one who did that. So that and the fact that I had fun improvising, and I'm an arrested adolescent anyway. And so I got that gig, and that was just I'd go in one day a week, usually on the weekends, and tape you do the setups to tape packages. But I got my foot in the door. So, Bob Lobel.
Yeah.
Right? Bob had come from New Hampshire radio as well. Bob was the premier sports guy in Boston television back then. And he told me, he said, Tom, you got your foot in the door. Whatever they ask you to do,
just do it.
Do it. So one of the things they asked me to do that I did was, for 2 years, I was the host of the Massachusetts State Lottery.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So you were pulling the balls out?
Yeah. Well, the balls, did their own thing, but I would just report. I was like Vanna telling you the obvious. And
oh my.
Yeah, but that's how I got friendly with Glick, because he was doing at that point an 8 to midnight radio show on BZ. He wasn't doing the overnight.
I didn't
anymore.
know that.
Yeah. So I would do the lottery on like Wednesdays and Saturdays was the Megabucks. So on Wednesday night, Megabucks would be over just before 10 o'clock, and I would trot over to BZ Radio to give Larry the Megabucks number and just to hang out.
Yeah.
And it turned into me hanging out for like 2 hours, 3 hours.
Was Muck his...
Yeah, Muck was there for part of it. Yeah, Kenny Meyer.
Ken Meyer.
And then I would fill in for Larry when he'd go on vacation. And that was...
Oh, my God.
For me, loving lighter, entertainment-based radio as opposed to issue stuff.
I don't even know how you describe Larry Glick. He was fascinating. He was all New England.
Yeah.
There was a cab driver named Charlie DiGiovanni.
Oh, yeah.
Who would go to this deli and bring him food, and then Charlie would sit there. And Charlie, the story was, had a key to BZ and could walk in anytime he wanted.
And Captain Red Slavin from Haverhill, my hometown.
It was there were just characters.
The harbor master,
and it was just fantastic radio.
Yeah.
And when he went from midnight to I think 5 in the morning, believe it or not, I used to listen to him all the time when I was still living in Indianapolis.
And Carl DeSuze would always show up late, and Larry would just rag all over him. And pretend to there was one time Gil Santos, when for a brief period of time I was the morning host on BZ Radio. I followed Dave Maynard for like probably a year and a half before they went all news.
So you did like 9 to noon kind of thing?
I did 5 to 9 a.m. Yeah. So one morning Gil Santos, the sports guy, just wasn't there. So I thought, okay, I'll play with that. I'll do a Glick like Glick used to do when Carl DeSuze didn't show up. So I became Biff Bergeron with BZ Sports, and I was reading all the sports headlines, like a really sort of low-cal sports announcer, And Gil came in furious.
No.
Oh yeah.
Did he think you were making fun of him?
Who knows? Who knows? But he went into, I could see, he didn't come in and confront me. He went to my producer. I could just see, talk about a mime show.
Screaming, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
These guys were just, icons of Boston and New England broadcasting.
Gary LaPierre on the news.
The best.
Became a good buddy.
Yeah. And it was an era that doesn't exist anymore.
No, it
sadly.
really doesn't. It really
because that was AM radio, which is I don't even know what that would do these days.
Well, podcasts are sort of the new radio
to a certain extent. That's true.
Yeah.
So I know you've told the story a million times, but I've only heard bits and pieces, and you've got to tell me, because you, like me, I think, have no fear of picking up a phone and calling any human in the world, and it's how I've met so many phenomenal people. And especially now with the web, if there's somebody I really like, Nate Burleson and Tony on the CBS Morning Show.
Yeah.
And I just instant direct message them, and the next thing I know, I'm taking them to lunch.
Is it Nate who's doing the new Hollywood
He's
Squares?
doing the new Squares.
Yeah, that's great.
In fact, I called Peter the other day, and I set up a meeting with Nate and Peter to have a conversation. Yeah, talk to you as well. The whole Three Stooges.
Oh, yeah.
How did that happen?
Well,
because we were all fans.
I'm always happy to tell that story. 16-year-old Tom, Saturday night, parents are out, sisters at a sleepover. I have no life, so I think, well, Mo and Larry of the Three Stooges are still alive. I have a little cassette tape recorder with, remember those little suction cup microphones
and
you could put
record
on the phone? Yeah, and then right into your cassette. So I decided from Haverhill, Massachusetts, with no consideration for my parents' long-distance phone bills.
Which were expensive back then.
Yeah, they were. To hit the rotary dial phone and call information in L.A. for Larry Fine or Mo Howard. And the operator said, we have a few M. Howards. I have one Larry Fine. So I took that number. I called, again, like that first night on the radio, heart beating like a jackhammer, but just compelled to do it. And this woman answered, said, oh, no, we get these calls every so often. That's my son. It's not that Larry Fine, but we do know where he is. He is recovering from a stroke at the Motion Picture Television Home in Woodland Hills, and I happen to have that number because we've gotten these calls before. So I call MPTF, which I now support and fundraise for all these years later. And the switchboard guy goes, Larry's playing poker. Let me get him. And then he comes back on and he goes, hey, can you call back in half an hour? He's got a good hand. So I do, and Larry comes on the phone, and you could tell a little bit. You can hear the special I did with Howard Stern where some of those interviews are included, 16-year-old and 17-year-old Tom. And you can hear Larry's voice a little bit, hit with the stroke, but still very distinctively Larry. And in that initial conversation, at some point, he said, out of the blue, you want Mo's number? So he gave me Mo's home phone number.
Oh, my.
And I called, and his wife answered and put Mo on. And Mo, unlike Larry, sounded just like the Mo we knew from the movies and sounded as angry as he goes, who gave you this number?
Did you say Larry?
I did. And as I remember it, there was a wonderful comedic pause followed by a Larry. And then, though, we started talking and had a wonderful conversation. And over the next 18 months, I could call them just to check in, see how they were doing. I was the president of a club in my high school, and we were doing a fundraiser for some local charities by running Three Stooges shorts one evening in the high school auditorium. And I decided, wouldn't it be great if Mo could speak to the audience? So I went in the principal's office with my ever-present cassette tape recorder, called Mo up, said, hey, it's Tom. They were doing this thing with your shorts, and they're raising money for charity. Would you mind just saying a few words to the... And he did. He did it like an improvised 30-second, lovely, lovely thank you to the audience for supporting them all these years. So I go back into the auditorium. I tell them, stop the movies, right? They do. I'm getting booed by everybody as I take the stage. And I'm going, just wait a minute. Just
wait till you see what I have.
And then I hit play, and they went nuts.
I bet.
Yeah.
That
was like my first celebrity interview. I wasn't even working in the radio station yet. I ended up playing it, some of the interviews on the morning announcements because I was hosting the morning announcements.
I did that.
Did you really?
Of course.
There's so many parallels.
I know. It's
I had people come in and sing the lunch menu. I had a trio come in and go, pizza and tuna fish, that's what we have today. It was all this crazy stuff. And so I played some of the Three Stooges interviews on the morning announcement. I actually had the ultimate tribute, somebody who... I forget who she was, but she said she used to cut classes more than her parents would have liked, but she started coming just to hear the morning notice. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Because it was like a mini radio show to start the day in the high school.
My first major show I worked on was Truth or Consequences, and we had Mo on as a guest.
Oh, my God.
And so I got to meet him, and I wish there were cell phones because I would have obviously taken the pictures, which we didn't do.
Yeah.
But he was Mo.
He was Mo. And even though he had white hair, he could comb it down and still had the same haircut.
He could kind of shook it like it came down.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was the nicest guy. And then we did a pie thing, of course.
Sure.
And he was 2'8". I mean, it seemed like he had gotten shorter as time went on. But, it was fun to reminisce with those guys.
Amazing. I got to do, as a matter of fact, on the campus where Larry spent the last year or so of his life, because I do charity work and I host the telethon on KTLA with Yvette Nicole Brown every year for MPTF. And it was on Pi Day, PI Day, and we thought, wouldn't it be fun to have a pie fight, like a Stooges level pie fight? So we did that.
Did you really?
Yeah. And it was great. And before the actual full-on pie fight, where I was hit by at least 30 of them, I did sort of this stand-up where I'm talking about how honored I am to be here, where Larry of the Three Stooges, and one of the organizers walks by, just hits me with a pie, which stuck, which was perfect. And then I went, really? And then boom, the other pie.
The other side.
Yeah, so.
I think it's Curly's grandson does some stuff on the web, and he's
no kidding.
Got it down, man. He does.
Does he do the voice and everything?
Oh, he's got it down. It's fantastic. Yeah, some really good stuff there.
They struggled. I mean, I know Shemp was the original third Stooge, and he came back. Shemp Curly and Moe were brothers, the Howard brothers. And when Curly had his strokes and couldn't carry on, Shemp came back. But, you know, after Curly, it's tough. And then they did Joe Besser, and that was like,
that never kind of worked.
Yeah, no, because he didn't want to be hit.
No.
So, not so high, you know. And then they had Curly Joe DeRita, but by that time, you know, they were a little too old to be.
They were done.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is odd to go back and look at some of those later shorts.
Yeah.
It was time to go away, but they chose to keep it. And the sad news was, you know, they got fired after a bazillion years.
Right.
And Moe became a bicycle messenger on the lot.
I did not
know that. Yeah.
No, because I thought he had, unlike the others, he had invested pretty well. Oh, no kidding.
So he was delivering messages.
Whoa.
And then when the 60s local Saturday morning shows happened, I don't know if you remember the one they did where they took the hosts from each regional market and put them on in the last movie, one of the last movies they did.
Oh, no kidding.
And it kind of brought them back for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, I would have liked to have thought all those guys saved their money, but as you know, most of the time in this lovely industry, people just think it's coming in forever, and then it disappears.
Well, it's like sports, you know, like athletes.
Athletes.
They have that limited window, and if they don't plan ahead,
which they never seem to do. And you hear about these $42 billion contracts, and then they're broke again.
That's right.
So while we're on this theme of talking to...
being broke.
Which hopefully we're both not. You are friends with some really interesting people, and I want to hear the story, first of all, about you and Dick Van Dyke and how that started.
Oh, that was just a lovely outgrowth of my friendship with Carl Reiner. Carl I hosted a TV talk show for 6 years in Boston at BZ, People Are Talking, which was on the Westinghouse stations on all of, Oprah did the one in Baltimore.
Yes.
And so Carl was promoting a book, and he was going to be my only guest for the hour. And it was like Christmas morning for me, live show. And I've got a picture of actually when he took the stage, when he came out, I get down and I start bowing to him, and he gets down and starts bowing to me. And the two of us are, you know, doing this whole thing to each other and just hit it off. Just, you know, and because I had so much knowledge of the Van Dyke Show and your show of shows with Sid Caesar. And
he appreciated all that.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, when somebody isn't just gushing at you, but really is talking the nuts and bolts and the why and wherefores and all that, which I was, because I like to think, and I'm sure you're the same way, you were sort of a student of how it all is put together.
Oh, yeah. Well, show of shows. I think it's interesting. When you and I were going to college, where'd you go to school?
I was going to go to Emerson College in Boston.
Me too, but I didn't.
And I also didn't, because I had a job in radio. And my reason for going to Emerson College was to get a degree to get a job in radio.
Yes, so you had that.
I already had it. So I just stayed after high school and worked in radio until my boss threatened to fire me. He said, he was a great guy. He took sort of a paternal interest. He was crazy, but he said, Tommy, I did not hire you so you would not go to college. Get some college, or I'm firing you.
Really?
Yeah. So I went to a community college and just took courses theater and mime and film history and things like that, just to keep my job.
Just to keep your job.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we knew about your show of shows and the programs that existed. Now, if you even mention All in the Family, to this particular generation, they have no idea what the heck that even is.
Yeah.
And I know that it's been many years since you and I went to college, but I still felt like I was a student of and can tell you about Maury Amsterdam and Rosemary and where they came from in particular episodes, and how Carl got ideas from the writers, and that's how the boat coming out of the closet happened, and on and on and on.
Right.
And so I also got a chance to interview Carl when I was doing the talk show on Lifetime, and he was very receptive to people who got it and knew the history.
Yep.
And so your friendship went many years back.
Oh, yeah, it did. We were friends. I mean, when I finally started working out here, he had said after that Boston talk show, if you're ever out in L.A., here's my number, you know, give me a call. I thought, oh,
sure.
my God, wow. But sure, I bet he says that to everybody. And I got a call from his assistant, like later that week, and she said, I just want you to know he does not do that. And seriously, if you and Lois are out call us. So I was out in one of those sort of preliminary meetings to see if there was a job out there to start making the jump to national. And I called, and he goes, "Come to the house for dinner. Estelle and I will have you for dinner." And Lois and I were like nervous wrecks. We were, oh my God, we're going to Rodeo Drive, Beverly Hills, Carl Reiner's house. It's like sweating and wondering, are we dressed okay? It couldn't have been more low-key and lovely and genuine. He's ripping up arugula from his front yard garden to give to Lois because they ended up talking about gardening. In the years that followed, once I was out here more regularly doing shows, Carl and I would go to lunch all the time. Estelle...
Where would you go to lunch?
Oh, just...
Nate Now's?
No, we never went to Nate Now's.
Really?
Yeah. But just whatever restaurant, in the vicinity, not too, sort of in the perimeter of where he lived. But Estelle would occasionally go to clubs and play her ukulele and sing.
So Estelle is Carl's wife, by the way.
It was Carl's wife, and of many, many years. And Rob's mom and Annie's mom and Lucas. So... Carl said, "Oh, you have to come," and Carl was her roadie. He'd set up all the equipment for her and all that. So I go to this. I can't even remember where it was, but this little club in Estelle.
Yeah, it was off on Hollywood, off of. I know exactly. Yes.
And so I'm there, and Carl goes, "Oh, I want you to sit with these people." And I went, "Oh, it was Mel Brooks and Anne Bancroft."
Of course it was.
So I'm sitting with Mel Brooks and Bancroft, listening to Estelle Reiner play the ukulele and thinking, wow.
Yeah, how did this happen, right?
How did this happen? So I kind of met Dick indirectly through Carl. I'd be over at the house. I remember one time I was over to pick him up for lunch, and Dick had called, and so Carl said, "Oh, Tom Bergeron's here, and from Hollywood Squares and videos," and oh yeah, and so I said hello to Dick briefly and didn't meet him for I think maybe could have been as much as a year later, because I was doing the dancing show at that point, and it was at some event, and Bonnie Hunt and I are talking, and Dick Van Dyke walks into the room, and we're both like, oh my, here's Dick, and he walks up to me and he goes, "You can't hold a job, can you?" That was the first thing.
First line.
Yeah.
Oh my.
And yeah, we've been friends.
He's in great shape.
He's doing great. 98. I was just at Malibu High. They just dedicated the Arlene and Dick Van Dyke Theater and launched the Van Dyke Endowment for the Arts. So I was there. Jason Alexander hosted, and Mark Hamill was there, and Michelle Lee, who was in a wonderful underrated movie with Dick called The Comic. That
Never even heard of that.
Carl wrote and directed. It was based on sort of very much like Buster Keaton's life, a silent movie comedian who kind of falls apart when sound comes in and is somewhat embittered. I mean, I think Keaton managed it better than Billy Bright, the character that Van Dyke played. But it's a really interesting movie.
Gotta look that up.
Called The Comic, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dick is a favorite. I met him several times. Worked with. I was invited because I was working at Nickelodeon at the time when he got his star on the Walk of Fame.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a lunch afterwards.
Yeah.
And I was at a table, and Dick came over to me and said, "Excuse me, I don't know who you are, but my grandkids really want to know if they can have a picture with you."
That's funny.
Because I was doing Double Dare at the time.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And that was like, oh, my God.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
And, all those guys, the classic guys. My Mel Brooks story, I was doing an ad sales event at Spago one night, and I see a sign that says, "Come and meet Max Brooks." And I looked at the maitre d' and I said, "Who's Max Brooks?"
His son, right?
And he points, and in walks Mel.
Yeah.
And he goes, "It's his son."
Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm supposed to be here schmoozing all the advertisers for Food Network, and I keep walking back there because now I see Carl walk in, I see Mel walk in, I see Dick walk in, I see Billy Crystal walk in, I see a who's who, I see Rob.
Yeah.
And so I want to be there. I don't want to be here doing this. And so I keep going back, and the first time Mel is holding court and there's 100 people around him.
Right.
And the next time I come back, there's 50 people around him. And the third time, the people are gone, and Mel is walking over to the buffet. And he looks at me and says, "Hello, young man, what's your name and what do you do?" And I said, my name is Marc Summers, and I work for the Food Network. Oh, what do you do for the Food Network? I start talking to him. And we have this conversation, and finally I say, I'm kind of not telling you the truth. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, I've seen the producers 25 times. And he said to me, why? And I said, because I'm obsessed with the show. And he said, well, tell me what it is.
Now, are we talking the musical?
No, we're talking about the Broadway show.
Oh, the Broadway show, not the movie.
Show.
Okay, yeah.
We start talking about Bialystok and Bloom, and he looks at me and he goes, you know, you kind of look like Bloom. And I said, wow, coming from you, that's amazing.
Yeah.
He said, we're bringing the show to Las Vegas. Would you like to audition for the Bloom role?
Whoa.
And I said, are you kidding me? Absolutely. He says, well, give me your number and I'll make it happen. But I need a favor from you. I said, what do you need from me? He said, my son Max Brooks wrote this book.
Is it the zombie apocalypse
yes.
thing? Yeah.
And he said to me, can you get him on the Today Show? And I said, you can do that. He said, how? I said, you call up and you say, this is Mel freaking Brooks.
Yeah.
I want my son on Today. I said, I couldn't possibly do that.
Yeah.
And at the time, I had been a regular on the Today Show. And I said, I'll make some phone calls. So he said, here's my number. If you can help me, call me. So I called the Today Show next day. And they said, yes, they'll certainly interview Max. And I called Mel the next day, and he picks up the phone, and we start having this long conversation about the producers and the history and Zero Mostel and all this stuff.
Wilder.
And he said, so were you able to get my kid on? And so we exchanged that. And so I had never met Mel up to that point. Every time I was in New York for the next several months, I ran into Mel Brooks every time I was on the street. And I sat down, and he was having dinner. He had bought the restaurant next to where the theater was called Angus McKindo's. Him, Nathan, Matthew, and he would go in there for dinner every night. And so there he was, and I would run into him. I eventually got the phone call to audition. Tony Danza had the lead as Bialystok, and I was up for the Bloom role. And I never went because I was too nervous.
Really?
I had met with a casting guy, and I had learned the song and taken the voice lessons and whatever. And when the push came to shove, I was in such fear that I couldn't handle it that I decided not to go.
Wow. Now, how do you reconcile that now, years later? Is that a regret that I just should have at least tried it? Or
they were going to bring, or they did bring the movie Big to Broadway, and I got the first phone call for the lead. And I said, why do you want me? And they said, well, right now you're hosting the biggest kids show on television, and it's all about asses in the seats, and kids will force their parents to buy the tickets. And so, once again, he sent me the sides, and I took the voice lessons, and I didn't show up to that audition as well.
Really?
Yeah, so I did go to the Big audition first, then I didn't go to the Bloom audition. Because I felt like I was out of my element. As much as I wanted to do, the first Broadway show I saw was in 1964.
Yeah, but let's bring it full circle, because Dick Van Dyke got a Tony Award for Bye Bye Birdie.
And had never danced.
And his background... And I talked about this when I spoke at the event at Malibu High. He was hosting the CBS morning show with Walter Cronkite
Can
as
you believe
his
that?
anchor. He wasn't a Broadway musical guy at all.
No, but you look at him dance now.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that he won a Tony Award.
You could have been the next Dick Van Dyke.
I doubt that. But, you know, it's amazing that my friend Will Reiner was called to do a show on Broadway as well. And... he got up on stage for the audition and couldn't remember a line.
Oh, yeah.
He's told me this. And couldn't remember the words of the song because I'm good at being a host, and I started off as a stand-up, and I started off as actually a magician. I used to work the Magic Castle and stuff like that.
Kidding.
I was in those circles and felt comfortable in that world. The Broadway idea was a dream. And to actually meet people who could get you there scared the living hell out of me. And so I didn't do it until recently, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. But so you got to be friends with Mel, and you got to be friends with Dick, and you got to be friends with Carl. How did the William Shatner thing go?
So Bill and Liz, his wife, big fans of Dancing with the Stars. Now, Bill had been on the FX show, right? But, I mean, he was a guest, in and out. We had a great time. We talked about it subsequently. You go, oh, yeah, I kind of remember that one, because of the unique apartment set and everything. But anyway, I'm at some event, some radio play reading, and he's in the audience. And he sees me, I see him, and he waves me over. And so, oh my God, William Shatner, okay. And he starts being effusive about Dancing with the Stars and, you know, my ad-libbing and all this stuff. And I respond to this odd weird because I'm getting complimented by this guy I've grown up watching. I start sweating. I just instantly, it's like I'm uncomfortable being complimented. But we just started talking, and it was kind of the same thing. Got together for lunch, and when I would do the 4th of July show in Washington for a few years for PBS, Lois and I would go from D.C. to Kentucky, where Bill and Liz were usually there at their property there because they have horses in Kentucky. And we'd hang out for a few days.
Does that make you nervous?
No, because it's kind of like with Carl. Once you kind of meet people as people,
yeah,
and you realize, they're kind of
the same.
They're working at it. They're working their craft. They have their rationale for why they do what they do. It's always fascinating to talk to people about process and creativity and all that. But Lois and Liz would be in the rental car. I'd ride shotgun in Bill's truck while he's driving, and we were going around Kentucky, and he could be a bit of a hellion behind the wheel. I thought, this is how I'm going to die. We're going to get T-boned in Bill's truck, and it'll be Captain Kirk and game show host killed in Kentucky. But we had lunch just a couple weeks ago, and he.
Aren't you guys working on a project together?
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, we have a story that we broke based on me buying back my childhood home, and a few years ago. And I was telling Bill about this at his house. We were having lunch, and he goes, "Tom, that's he doesn't really talk like that, but I'll do it for the hell of it. That's a movie." And I said, "Well, I don't think that's a movie." I said it might be a jumping off point because there's no real conflict. My sister and I really get along, so we broke a story where the house is sort of a central character, but it's with a family that has come apart, and it's a holiday movie, and mystical things bring that, because Bill's very one level of his interest, and he's a voracious reader, is about the communication networks of forests and how trees actually communicate with each other. Healthy trees will send nutrients to sicker trees.
Had no idea.
Just amazing. And so based on his passion for that and the idea of this house so the house and was built from the wood from the forest it's surrounded by, and things happen, and it's Christmas, but we don't have a Santa Claus trope in there. And so I brought in a showrunner friend, Nat Bernstein, and he brought in two incredibly talented women, Marla Sokoloff and Katie Keene, who Marla's also a director. She's done some Lifetime and Hallmark movies. And the two of them took the story that Bill and I crafted and turned it into a wonderful screenplay, and Village Roadshow optioned it.
Nice.
And so it's been I'm used to live. I'm used to things moving quickly. This has been a bit of a slog, but of course then the strike happened and all this. Yeah. So now they got the screenplay, and they're going to start pitching it to streamers, I think.
That would be a fun thing to do, especially with him.
Yeah, but just having a screenplay credit by, story by William Shatner and Tom Bergeron, that doesn't suck, even if it never goes any further. Yeah.
So your first national show was the Fox thing, I guess. But
with FX, yeah.
Yeah, but Squares was, I guess, the first big thing?
Yeah, that was the first one. And I'll never forget you calling me. You want to tell that story?
You tell it.
Well, you were lined up to be the host first.
Yeah.
And I forget what happened there.
Well, there's many stories.
They brought two new producers in with Moffat Lee?
This was the craziest thing. Rosie O'Donnell was in town doing the talk show.
Right.
And I get called to do the singing and dancing game show hosts.
Uh-huh.
So it was me and Tom Kennedy and a bunch of people, and I walk into the green room, and Chuck Willery comes up to me and says, Summers, is it true you're fired from Squares? Now, I had been hired. We shot promos.
Oh, my God.
They made the announcement at the CBS O&Os, and I got a standing ovation.
Craig Shoemaker told me you shot promos, and I did. I don't know. Is that true?
Yeah, we shot the promos.
Wow.
Hi, Marc Summers. Welcome to... And so Willery comes up to me and says, is it true you're being fired from Squares? And I said, this is the first I'm hearing about it. And he said, well, if it's true, I want to audition for it. So I go into my little dressing room and call Babette Perry, who was my agent at the time.
Mine too.
And I said, I just heard a rumor. What's the rumor? That I'm no longer the host of Hollywood Squares. And she says, who told you that? And I said, Chuck Woolery. And she goes, well, what else do you know? And I said, no, I got a better question. What else do you know?
Yeah, no kidding. Don't. I'm not a dentist here. Don't make me pull teeth.
And she said, well, the rumor is that you're being replaced. And I said, well, when were you going to tell me this? And she said, well, the deal's not done yet. And I said, well, who are you talking to? And she said, we're talking to Tom Bergeron. And I said, well, Tom just moved in. He's a neighbor of mine.
Yeah.
Tell me when the deal's done.
Now, what predicated that shift? Because I didn't know any about
stories.
This. Yeah.
The story that I had heard was, and I don't know what's true and what's not true. Two stories. The first one was I had just come out and made the announcement that I have obsessive compulsive disorder, and
right.
Everything blew up.
Yeah.
People thought I was crazy because nobody had talked about OCD at the time.
No, that's
I was
true.
the first guy to come out.
Yeah.
And the next thing I know, I'm on with Stern.
Yeah.
I'm on Oprah. I'm on the Today Show. I'm in People magazine. And the rumor was that I'll tell you the story. I got a phone call because when
Had you met Whoopi and Moffat and Lee at that point?
Oh, I knew Moffat and Lee very well because I worked on Fridays.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But I had not met Whoopi.
Mm-hmm.
And I had done a ton of work around the country when Double Dare went into syndication, and I would always go into the local stations and cut local promos.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a phone. I made friends with all these station managers, and I get a phone call from a station manager in the Midwest who said, "I don't know what you know, but we just got a phone call. We were picking up squares, and King World is really bashing you and saying horrible things about you."
Oh my gosh!
And I said, "You're kidding me." So, needless to say, it got ugly. And the next thing I know, you got the job. And the first thing I wanted to do for two reasons. One, you were my neighbor. And secondly, we didn't know each other that well, but I certainly didn't want us to walk into each other and be uncomfortable.
Right.
So I called and I said, congratulations.
And again, to anybody listening, the idea that somebody would be as gracious as you were, and I didn't know all the backstory about the OCD and all of that, but I just was so touched that you called and were so almost understanding about,
Well, here's the deal, and I think I said it to you. If I'm getting fired, somebody's going to get the job, and I'm glad it's you.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you said. Yeah.
And I actually asked. I have been a regular on The View since 1999.
Yeah.
And at one point, I went up to Whoopi and said to her, "I've heard two stories. The other story was that when they brought you in for the Center Square, that you wanted me gone." And she said to me, "Mark, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I had no idea who you were.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about you."
Yeah.
And it was one of those, it's show business.
And Whoopi and I had met on the Fox show.
Yes.
And she loved the whole thing. As a matter of fact, when I showed up for the audition in L.A., first thing she said was, "How's Bob, the puppet?"
Oh, no kidding.
So they do a mock show, and from my standpoint, I didn't think I wanted to do a game show. Yeah, I wasn't. I was... I had just gotten a big payout from ABC News.
Yes, from the GMA deal.
For the GMA deal. So I'm kind of feeling a little cocky and comfortable at this point. But Babette said, because she was my agent too at the time, and she goes, I said, "Well, I don't know if I want to do a game." She goes, "By the way, you have 2 young kids. You are unemployed, right?"
Yeah.
Now. Oh, okay, that's true. So I fly out, and Whoopi and I just kind of picked it up where we had left off on the Fox show. She was one of the bright spots of that abysmal experience, turning the wonderful cable show into a nightmare network show. And she had brought James Brown with her, and she was promoting the movie The Associates, and so and we had that ballroom, and James Brown and I are dancing together in the ballroom, and Whoopi's having a ball, and so when I got to the audition, they told me later, you were the only one who wasn't intimidated by Whoopi because we were just kidding back and forth and all that. So they offered me the gig with the provision that I move out with the family to L.A. So I turned it down.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I turned it down, and I said, no, I know how these shows shoot. Pat Sajak had been on my Boston talk show. He took me through the whole...
Yeah.
I said, when Pat retired, I was on CNN the night of his last show, And I said, a lot of news about Pat retiring. He's been semi-retired for 41 years. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You work 2 days a week,
yeah.
you know, and which is true. And he was one that kind of got me hip to that. So I wasn't going to take the girls out of school and upend their lives so that Daddy could work 2 days a week. Fly me out. I'll shoot them and I'll fly back.
Of course.
And so when I turned it down, I think they were a little surprised. So they came back like a day or so later and said, all right, well, we'll put you up in a hotel and we'll fly you out.
So that's how it worked out.
Yeah.
And you did it for how many years?
6.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, 4 of them with Whoopi and Moffat Lee, and the last 2 with Henry Winkler and Michael Levitt as the executive producers. And I think as much as I loved the 4 years with Whoop and the gang, it got too blue. You know, it got a little too... for like early, it was on 7:30, 7 o'clock in most markets. And it just got a little too...
Have you seen Family Feud recently?
No.
I mean, everything is a sex question.
Yeah.
And
I just thought it's fine to do some of that.
Yeah, but not every
innuendo,
question.
But not every question. Yeah. So when Henry and Michael came in, they have such a love for old TV and history. So, it was like, oh, great. Well, first of all, Henry's the ultimate
nicest man in show business.
Seriously is.
I know it.
And I wanted him to give me a little Fonzie, right? And because we were doing a press tour, we were going to different cities every day, and Michael would connect with us, but Henry and I were traveling together. And I said, give me a little. He goes, no. So finally, we're up and running, and we're shooting the shows, and Lois and the girls come out one weekend, and so on the Saturday, Lois and the girls are at the studio, and he meets my wife for the first time. And then Sunday morning, they had to fly back because the girls were going to school on Monday. And so I show up at the studio on Sunday morning after getting them off to the airport. And for the one and only time, Henry goes, Tom, Lois, hey.
That's great.
Yeah.
I actually did a game show that he produced for me when I was doing something at Game Show Network called Win Tuition, which was on for 10 minutes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But I loved working with the guy.
Yeah.
And he's been a very kind
One of my favorite Square shows, there are 2. One during the Whoopi era was the You Fool episode.
Oh, yeah.
Where Gilbert's the last one.
What was it, like
chosen.
15 times to go to Gilbert?
We only got one game done for the whole show because we started a second one, but we ran out of time.
It's online if you want to see it.
Yeah, and it's on my website too, tombergeron.com. But also the April Fool's show that Henry and Michael pulled on me and all the stars, where I had been told we were going to do a special Teacher Tuesday thing because some of the CBS stations were preempting us for NCAA basketball. And I'm not a big sports fan, so I was like, okay, all right. And they have 2 contestants who are really actors. And they start getting increasingly belligerent with each other, and I have no idea. Penn and Teller are in the Square. They make a living fooling people. They were Brad Garrett. None of us knew.
And what did they do?
They just, the guy starts snipping at the woman. That was stupid. And she starts to cry. And
so what did you do?
And here's the thing. Lois was there that time, and Henry grabbed Lois to take her into the control room because he didn't want her tipping me off. And I'm thinking, and you'll get this, if I can get 22 and a half minutes of this in the can, we can air it.
Yeah, right,
exactly. This is like a freak show.
Yeah, this is magic.
But I'm not going to stop. As a matter of fact, I at one point I turned to my camera and I went, for this I gave up the audition for Card Sharks? And Henry at one point turned to Lois in the booth and goes, he's not going to stop. And she goes, he knows it's good. So she knew it was an April Fool's joke. I didn't.
How did it pay off?
It paid off when finally, because I would have kept going.
Yeah.
Finally, Henry comes over the intercom and goes,
April Fool.
Tom, April Fool.
Oh, my.
And you can see my reaction is instantly, that's effing brilliant. And you can see everybody in the squares were like blown away. These 2.
They were great,
And I should have recognized the guy because he had been on Married with Children a bit. But, on a game show, you get people in L.A. who are part-time, whatever. But it was Carrie Armstrong was the woman who broke down in tears And the two of them were just brilliant.
I got to look that up.
And on the episode, the way they cut the episode, they kept in some of the, like during the commercial break when I come down from my podium and I'm talking to my stage manager and I'm going, am I the only one not on drugs here? And I'm talking to the audience and I'm going, it's not me, don't blame me. But yeah, and Henry comes on and says, okay, here's what's going to happen next. So he kind of takes you through the whole April Fool's joke. But it was brilliant.
Oh, that's great.
Brilliant.
The other one was when Peter Marshall came on.
Oh, yeah.
And you went in the square and he took over as a host. And he hadn't done it in God knows how long.
Right.
And he just kind of went right back.
He did. And when I heard that he was going to be the center square for a week, that was my only request. Can we swap?
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
Good. What a smart idea.
Because I just wanted to sit there and watch him host it in person. Because I grew up watching it.
Yeah.
And Henry, this is the producer instinct of Henry Winkler. So we do it, and it's great. And Henry goes, after we shot it, he goes, wait a minute. We forgot to get you two crossing. So we restaged Peter coming down from the center square, me coming down from the podium.
Oh, cool.
The two of us walking, giving each other a high five, and he takes it. And it was just so cool. It was so cool.
There were some magical moments on that stuff. They're bringing it back. I'll be very curious to see.
Yeah, it'll be a weekly, right? I think it's going to be a weekly show for like an hour.
I just contacted them. I don't know if they're shooting in New York or L.A.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
That'd be fun to go see.
Yeah.
When do we the two of us can go sit there with a notepad?
Yeah, honest to God. Tell me about being a mime. How did that start?
Oh, that started, it's kind of an outgrowth of being forced to go to college or being fired from the radio show. I loved silent film comedy. Buster Keaton, Chaplin, Harold Lloyd, Harry Langdon, all these people. And I was always kind of drawn to the idea of silent comedy because of that. And the only real modern day version of silent comedy was, epitomized by Marcel Marceau. And so when I went to this community college to avoid being fired from my radio show, there was a mime class, and I took to it like a fish to water. It's something that's just. And when I was doing the thing with Dick Van Dyke at Malibu High, I said we have so many things in common. We're both part-time mimes, and we both did the CBS morning show in different decades. So I ended up doing the morning radio show in my hometown, and then working with a theater company doing mime performances at colleges and theaters in the area in the evening. And a friend of mine said, Tom, it's really weird because when we hear you, we can't see you. And when we see you, we can't hear you.
Great line.
Yeah, I know.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And how did you get into TM?
That was because of my temper, which I love it when people are surprised, because there were, in my bachelor days, and it was never directed at other people. It was always either inwardly directed or sheetrock in my apartments. And there were a few bachelor apartments that I left putting posters over the holes that I had punched in the wall. And when Lois and I were dating, there was something, I forget what the heck. Oh, I know what it was. Oh, here's a great story. So I'm doing on my vacation from the radio show in New Hampshire. I have a couple weeks off. So I'm rehearsing a one-man show at the local theater. And I was rehearsing it while I was still doing the radio show so that I could do it on my vacation week. And great little theater, then called Theater by the Sea, now the Seacoast Repertory Company. But they had a kind of seedy little area backstage, and I would just be so tired that I would grab a nap, on their couch. God knows what was on their couch, because I developed scabies. You know what scabies are?
I do.
They kind of burrow under your skin.
Believe me, a guy with OCD knows all about that stuff.
Right, there you go. So, Lois and I are in the early throes of romance, so I give her scabies.
No.
Yeah. So we have to go to this pharmacy to get this ointment that's going to take care of it. And I am so embarrassed and humiliated. And we're sitting in my Volkswagen Beetle about to go into the pharmacy. And I said, I am so effing sorry. This is so, and I hit the driver's side door just out of frustration, like I used to hit apartment walls. And Lois said, if we're going to have any future, that's going to stop. The very next day, I signed up for a TM course.
So you've been doing it that long, 40
I've been
plus
doing it
years.
43 years. Yeah, every day.
And you and I have something in common as well, and that's hiking and walking.
Yeah, I hiked this morning, as a matter of fact.
So I started doing these trips in Europe where first time I did Tuscany and Umbria, we did 70 miles in 6 days.
Oh, my God.
Then I did Portugal, where we did 60 miles in 5 days.
Whoa.
And it's spectacular.
Yeah.
Because you see scenery that you wouldn't normally see. They take you, like when we were in Tuscany, we were up in some mountains where there were some old chateaus that had not been inhabited in 30, 40, 50 years, but they were still intact. And to walk in those areas and see these abandoned homes in the middle of nowhere, but it's soothing. And I still hike. When I was just doing my one-man show in New York, and I did 1.6 million steps. I walked 653 miles from January 27th till June 5th.
Wow. Is that the run of the show?
Yeah, that was the run of the show.
Yeah.
And I just find that it calms me down. It just communing with nature.
Yeah.
But sometimes I take my phone and listen to music. Sometimes I listen to podcasts, and sometimes I just do nothing.
Yeah.
What are your reasons for going out and doing these hikes?
Well, Dick Van Dyke says it, keep moving, moving, because especially the older we get, and how many of our peers do you know who are sedentary and who they don't challenge themselves anymore?
Peter Marshall's 98, so I just talked to him the other day.
Yeah.
15 years ago, I thought, I'm done.
Yeah.
And he said to me, Mark, do not stop.
Yeah.
All my friends who stopped have died.
Yeah.
And he said, just keep moving.
Yep.
And I hear that in my head all the time. And people say to me, why you keep, I'm 72, why are you doing this stuff? Why not?
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, career stuff.
No.
I mean, just like, I train 3 days a week. I try to hike twice a week when I'm out here. And when I'm back east, I'm at the gym almost every day.
Oh, yeah.
Because I just want to keep everything going.
Yeah.
I'm doing some writing now. The film project thing is like the kind of stuff that comes out of left field that I'm more interested in doing at this point. We were talking before we started recording this that I have no interest in hosting anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's no show. I went through a period where I wanted to host the Today Show, and I wanted, I have no desire to do that either.
Yeah. It's funny. Once it's gone, it's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
And so did that just happen sort of overnight, or is it just nothing? Because I'm sure you still get offers.
I left the video show, My Choice, season 25. I had done it for 15 years. And it just felt like the right time to, as I said, pass the piñata stick to somebody else. And it was Alfonso, who I'm very friendly with, and thought he was the perfect choice. When the dancing thing went down, I had 2 more years on my contract. And
you're not. I'm going to interrupt you for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
You, like me, we do not hold back.
No.
And I have not gotten jobs because I opened my mouth too much.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want my opinion, but I gave it to them.
Right.
And you have been open enough to say you didn't like the direction that show was going.
No, I didn't. I didn't care for the showrunner. I didn't care for some decisions they made. And when they and I'll just give you the briefer version because I've beaten it to death. But the promises were made and not kept. And when that happened, I went public. And so I was there for that season. But I was going to leave 2 seasons later anyway.
Because
I would have taken it to season 30. And in the same way that I felt I want to be the one to say when it's done. That was my goal. Had I loved the showrunner and had I loved the direction of the show, I still was going to leave at season 30. Mm-hmm. And what happened almost turned out to be a blessing in a way, because the last season I did was season 28, which wrapped in November of 2019, right before the pandemic. So what would have been my final 2 seasons, had I stayed on, would have been in the pandemic, where everybody was secluded from everybody. You're in pods. You're being tested all the time. Everything I loved about that show, the camaraderie, I would throw mid-season parties for everybody so different departments could get to know each other. We couldn't have done any of that, and I would have hated it. And so I got, you know, if there's a good time to get fired, I got fired at the best time. And I'll tell you, there was like the universe sometimes tells you when you're done. I would always, after a show, take friends or family over to the Grove, to my favorite haunt, the Whisper Lounge. I can't tell you the amount of times Florence Henderson would show up after she competed, and just the two of us would go over to the Whisper Lounge. And,
nice. And
that was like my regular place. They always knew I was coming right after the show because I never stuck around for the press stuff. The Whisper Lounge closed the Sunday before the Monday premiere of my last season. And I said to Lois, it's over.
It's over.
I mean, I was already, bumping heads with people, but
you didn't like some of the talent they were booking, correct?
Yeah, yeah. But I also didn't care for the showrunner and stuff that was going on.
Is that the person who just got fired?
Huh?
Is that the person who just got fired?
He, not just it happened. I think about 2 seasons ago or something. And that's when I was still on, when it was Twitter, and somebody told me about it, and all I tweeted was "Karma's a bitch."
Yeah.
But looking at it from this perspective, it was perfect timing.
It was time.
Yeah, because those 2 COVID years, I would have hated. I would have hated them.
Who did you admire on TV when you were growing up?
Well, it's interesting. Dick, Carl, Bill. To be able to.
Were you a talk show guy, though? Did you watch Johnny and Mike?
Yes, Carson, definitely. Mike Douglas, because it was sort of Merv Griffin during the daytime, because they were both on at daytime with Arthur Treacher as Griffins, But Douglas's show was peculiar in that he had that weekly change of co-hosts. And as we alluded to earlier, one of those weeks was John Lennon and Yoko Ono. And the juxtaposition of Mike Douglas and John and Yoko, which oddly seemed to work.
It did.
And I think that spoke to Mike Douglas being a lot hipper than you would have thought.
I just saw an episode where the Stones were on.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
And he was so uncomfortable with them.
Oh,
he made
really?
some stupid remark about their hair or something.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. And, because, he was that line between, old school and what was coming.
Right. Well, he's also playing to his predominant audience in daytime, and they weren't Stones fans, I'm sure, but that
was appointment TV, though.
It sure was. But, I watched an episode online of The Tonight Show when it was still in New York and when it was an hour and 45 minutes.
Yes.
And Ed McMahon and Skitch Henderson would
from
host
11:15 to 11:30.
They'd host the first 15 minutes. Yeah. The dullest television you're ever going to see.
Yep.
And then Johnny would come on at like 11:30. And, it's interesting because over the years, you've come to feel, or anyone who grew up watching them, I think, in light of where late night shows are now, he was appointment television. He could make or break careers by just
a stand-up comic on the Tonight Show.
Yeah, that was it. And if he waved you over to sit down,
yeah,
that was the ultimate tribute. But you watch these hour and 45-minute shows, and you realize they could be pretty dull.
Oh, yeah.
Even Johnny could be pretty dull.
Oh, yeah, because the last 20 minutes it was some author you never heard of.
Yeah.
And it was doing that stuff. But that's when local news was 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
And some of the markets only took the Tonight Show, from 11:15 on.
And they would do live, I don't think Johnny ever did, but like Ed McMahon would do live Alpo commercials and things like, it was just so weird.
It was. Did you ever meet Johnny?
No, I worked with Ed for several years on the muscular dystrophy Jerry Lewis telethon because I would come in at midnight in the later years so Jerry could rest.
Right.
And so I got to go to a lot of meetings with Ed and just pick his brain about Johnny, which was incredible. And even doing that, because we did it in Vegas. I think the first year I did it at the Beverly Hilton, and then it was in Vegas after that. And I'd work with the Muppets at like 3 a.m, and we'd be improvising stuff. There was one act, because they booked the weirdest acts
I
at
know,
that time.
from midnight till like 7.
Bob the Spoon. Right?
What was Bob the Spoon?
Bob the Spoon would play Flight of the Bumblebee on spoons of different sizes. So it's 3 a.m. I'm live in Vegas, and it comes to me, and I'm thinking, all right, why not?
Yeah.
So I say on the MDA telephone, I say, so I'm watching Bob the Spoon, and I'm thinking, what the fork is that? Let's go to the tote board.
Fantastic. Oh, my gosh. That is hysterical, man.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. So you're spending part-time on the West Coast. You have a daughter getting married.
Yes, in August. Yeah,
which is
our
nice.
youngest
Congratulations.
daughter. Thank you.
And so how many kids do you have?
2 daughters.
And so the other one is where?
She's in New Hampshire.
Doing what?
She runs it's a really wonderful little online business called Fair Folk Trade. So she's on Instagram, and check it out.
So you and Lois have been married, you said 42 years?
42, yeah. You got 8 years on it.
Yeah, I just hit 50. So many of my friends, the relationship sort of disappeared when the kids left. And when Alice and I first got married, I made a point that once a month we would go on a trip together, whether it was Santa Barbara or Laguna or something, because you got to work on the marriage.
Yeah.
And
how long had you been married before you had kids?
Got married in 1974, and our son was born in 1980, so 6 years.
Again, another parallel. It was 6 years after we got married.
Really?
Yeah, that we had Jess, and it was very. It was by design. We wanted to spend time together. Getting to know each other.
To.
And then when we had the girls, we were ready. But that's so weird.
Yeah.
It's 6 years.
6 years, yeah. It was a perfect time.
Yeah.
We were really ready at that point.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. We have a long drive to go back to where we come from, so we're going to say goodbye. Thanks so much for listening to Marc Summers Unwraps. Next week, who's coming? Stay tuned. We'll find out. Take care.
That's a tease.
Marc Summers Unwraps is a production of Believe Limited, created by me, Marc Summers, and Jessica Richmond. Produced by Keith Korneluk and Jessica Richmond. Executive produced by Patrick James Lynch and Ryan Gielen. Post-production support from Joshua Sterling Bragg and Believe Limited. Don't forget to subscribe or follow the show on your favorite podcast player, and if you really love it, why don't you leave us a rating and a review? Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Marc Summers Unwraps.